We're back to the Neil Haley Show, and I'm with my guest today, best-selling author Len Sciuto. Len, you know what, Hades Crypt. I'm excited to talk with you because every time we talk, you really educate me. It's been about a week and a half since our last podcast, and a lot of things have been going on in Iran. But you want to relate what's happening in Iran and the world turmoil to your books because a lot of the stuff you have seen in history and you related a lot to your books.
And a lot of the stuff that I've related has come to fruition as well.
We don't want you to be the soothsayer, that's for sure.
No, I don't want to show up at the Pentagon again for the fourth time, or end up on a place like Fox News and people watching. That's not my bag. Anyway, good morning to all the listeners. I apologize for not being able to do this on a regular weekly basis. I have had a couple of medical issues that I've had to deal with, but I'm glad to be with you this morning. And I'd like to talk first of all about Hades Crypt. I will tell you that it has been on the best-selling list for now 23 weeks, and I'm very honored and humbled at the fact that folks out there that have been listening to our podcast and talking to me personally and sending me mail, that they're supporting me and the book, which in turn supports junior enlisted people, E1 to E4 across the board. And as most of you know, 2/3 of the book royalties go to junior enlisted in the military, E1 to E4, because that's how I started out, at the bottom of the rating total poll for the military. Now, the first book I wrote was called Tango Down China Sea, and that book is based upon my submarine. I was attached to a submarine the first 12 years of my 36-year career. And in 1970, that submarine went against the Russians in the Black Sea. Since 1950, the Navy's been collecting sonar tapes on friendly and unfriendly ships. And in 1970, Russia came out with a new Cashin-class guided missile frigate. We went into the Black Sea to get those tapes. That mission was classified for 20 years. So it became unclassified after 1990. We got the sonar tapes. It took us a long time to get out of the Black Sea back into the Mediterranean because of, I'll call it just Russian activities. So the Tango Down book is based upon that mission from a fiction aspect. The second book was called Devil's Delegation, and now that I was in the Coast Guard, I got activated for Desert Shield and Storm. That war was between 1990 and 1992. You have to remember, prior to late '89, early 1990, a gentleman, I won't even call him a gentleman, a man by the name of Saddam Hussein took Kuwait City. We were asked to assist and help the government. So we went in and went to Desert Shield and Storm. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because when I got called back to active duty, I had written portions of that defense plan, and I became the operations officer for that war for an operations perspective. And there were two of us working 12-hour shifts. I was the senior guy. I was responsible for 1,416 men and women in that war, and I lost nobody, thank God. First things that we started doing, we started training Navy personnel to rappel down from helicopters onto foreign ships and American ships that were underway, to be able to inspect them, interdict them, and require them to leave the area if they were from an undesirable country, I'll call it that way. The other aspect of that was a terrorist group has an idea to detonate a nuclear bomb in the United States, and that's what the Devil's Delegation is about. Hades Crypt, third book, which is out, which is the best-selling book in 2020. If we talk about all of the natural resources that are in inside and under the Arctic Circle, they are insurmountable. When we looked at the military aspects of the Arctic Circle, Russia had 3 military bases up there. The United States had none. In 2025, when President Trump took office, they started reactivating their radar stations and their air bases. And they started military personnel, I'll call it boots on the ground, inside the Arctic Circle and creating new military bases to handle those people. Additionally, they had 9 icebreakers, and they brought those icebreakers into the Arctic Circle as well. Why? Lines of supply, lines of support, personnel, equipment. You have to remember that to get to some of these bases, due to the weather and the ice and the snow, if you can't land a plane, the only way you can get it there is walk it in or use icebreakers and then get close enough to be able to walk it in or drop it off right next to the base. The United States in that same time frame, and I mentioned 20 to 24, I should say, the United States had no military bases inside the Arctic Circle. So when Trump took office and Russia started expanding in the circle, as I talk to you today, there are more than 32 Russian bases inside the Arctic Circle, and there are now 10 military bases inside the Arctic Circle that are U.S. We're hoping to expand those bases, but at the same time, Russia is expanding their bases. The other aspect of this, as I mentioned, 9 Russian icebreakers. The United States only has 2. So we have a tremendous increase in shipbuilding in this country once we get a finalized federal budget, commence building ships again. In 1992, when I left Shield and Storm, the United States Navy had 954 ships. When President Trump took office, there were 418 ships, and I'm talking about in January of 25. Of those 415 ships, only 228 of them were active duty in mothballs. So we went from the world's largest Navy to the world's 3rd largest Navy. And the 2 above us are the 2 that you can obviously identify, China and Russia. So that's why I started writing Haiti Script, and that's between Russia and the United States in and under the Arctic Circle for not only command and control of that area, but the natural resources in that area. Now, the 4th book I'm writing is called Desperate Countermeasures, and a terrorist group is going after kidnapping, torturing, and gathering information from the people they've tortured of the authors of the 14 government departments that created the National Nuclear Contingency Plan. So that one is also pertinent. And I'll go back to 20 to 24 when we had unvetted borders. With all of those people coming in, of course, you know, there were illegal immigrants, but of course there were also legitimate immigrants. But I'll address the illegal immigrants first. ICE, that's Customs and Immigration and Border Patrol, are working to remove those illegal immigrants, many of which were criminals. And we're still seeing this today. We're seeing people killing people for no particular reason. There are other peoples that are stealing. There are other people that are trying to create bombs. It's a mess. And one of the things that I'll mention to you as I was doing the research for this 4th book, which was Desperate Countermeasures, I found out that of those people that are still illegal immigrants that are still in the United States government estimates there are 3,000 of them that are former terrorists that could belong to a terrorist group called ISIS. Now that creates issues for us. The other aspect I'll mention to you is, as I talk about what's going on here in the United States, we have to address what's going on with Epic Fury. Now, in June of last year, we bombed and supposedly took out 3 of their nuclear enrichment facilities. The information that I heard that I could only partially document was one of those facilities was not completely destroyed, and the Iranians tunneled in to be able to have access to that nuclear enriched material. Now, the reason I say, some people will say, well, that's impossible because that facility was down deep underground. Israel, quite by accident, found an underground tunnel that was more than 7 miles long, down 210 feet from into Israel from Iran. So that's how they were getting their people in. But as you walk this tunnel, and they had a video of it, there were areas for sleeping, there were areas where equipment was stored, there were areas for cooking, there were areas for storage of military weapons. So that is something that when they say they tunneled in to get their hands on some of that material. Now, what Epic Fury started, we were talking about having an issue with the fact that Iran wanted to create a nuclear weapon. They were claiming that they were going to, it was the United States that was going to, their intention was to attack the United States, I'll put it that way. The other aspect of this is, I referenced in a past podcast that the snake had 3 heads. That was North Korea, Russia, and China. Last year, Iran became the 4th head to that snake. And in all of the years prior, when Trump was in between 16 and 20, China was not able to sell crude oil and natural gas on the open market. In that time frame, we bought 4% or 8% from Russia. When Biden took office, that went up to 13% from Russia. And when the snake, Iran became the 4th head of the snake, they made a deal with China. Now, they're selling their oil and natural gas on the open market for $90 to $100 a barrel. Their price to China was $20 a barrel. The reason it was $20 a barrel, there was a cooperative agreement between China and Iran. China sent Iran sodium perchlorate and missile components, short-range and long-range missile components. Now, the reason that that's important, and you obviously have to remember that, sodium perchlorate, as I mentioned in an earlier podcast, is the main product to create rocket fuel. So with all of the components being sent to them and the sodium perchlorate being sent to them, there's also the possibility that China, being a nuclear possessor as well, could push nuclear material in the containers that are labeled sodium perchlorate. And the reason I mention that is the containers for sodium chlorate are specialized containers. Those containers go in what looks like the railroad cars that you see running up and down the tracks, but they're on ships. They're container ships, okay? There's no way for anyone doing inspections on those ships, including the United States, to be able to determine if there's any radioactive activity being emanated through the perchlorate container, through the container, the main container that's stacked up on that ship. So there's a strong possibility that they were improving and increasing their nuclear material, which they had the ability to enrich. Now, the other aspect that also caused Epic Fury to be created and initiated was there was a 4th facility. And so that, plus the fact that Iran, since 1979, has killed 2,900 Americans, and in my opinion, and you've heard it on the news, that's open warfare. The other aspect that I will mention is their terrorism since 1979, their government since 1979 has been more terroristic than political, than for its own people. And Epic Fury, after we took out their ships, their minesweepers, their air, their missiles, and they're not all gone, the missile aspects and the drone aspects, but the ships are. When we did all of this, and they refused to have a ceasefire and agree to the 15 points that were presented to them by our government, they had they had women and children the bridges or circumvent their energy plants, electrical producing plants. Now, if you looked at that video, the majority of those people on the bridges, around the electrical producing plants were women and children. Now, why was that? That, in my opinion, and it's not documented, was that the government talked to the parents and the men of those women and children and said, they're going to do this or we're going to wipe out your family. Now, we know that there's been more than 40,000 of the population of Iran executed in that country. Recently, I found out, and it's documented, they judged 4 women and they've been sentenced to execution. Now, the Iranian government knows, and it's a philosophy of that religion, if you call it a religion, believes that the women, when they die, if they're virgins, get to go to heaven. What has been happening to these women have been violated, and then they get executed. And that's publicized so that the population knows, especially the women, that if they go against the government, they have no possibility of getting into heaven. And that's important to that religion. These 4 women, I believe, because we have no control, will end up with the same fate. And that is terrible. That's degrading. That's despicable. The other aspect of lining these people up around all these facilities that are key is the fact that the population, plus the more than 40,000 that they've killed, the population of this country doesn't mean diddly squat. The only thing that is important to the government that's in control right now is to stay in control, to keep in control, to keep their iron fist on the people, on that country. And that's not going to happen. Now, one of the supporters of Epic Fury, I'll mention real quick, was CENTCOM. Now, CENTCOM is a crucial command in the Middle East, but that's not the main headquarters. The main headquarters are here in Tampa, Florida. Due to its strategic location in the Middle East, it plays a significant role for regional security and stability. It includes overseeing and supporting 21 countries, making it a key player in the geopolitical dynamics of the Middle East. Now, CENTCOM's operation has been pivotal in addressing threats such as terrorism and regional conflicts, and it continues to be a specific vital military strategy in the Middle East. Now, the reason I say that is when we initiated Epic Fury, one of the areas that we were using offensive weapons came out of Central Command. The command's recent initiatives, I will mention, at the air command post have been air defense for Qatar, further solidifying its importance in the regional and further emphasizing regional defensive cooperation and security for the Middle East. Now, the reason I mentioned CENTCOM in the Middle East is I originally had some concern about this 15-day ceasefire, and it still could happen, but I'm praying to God and I'm hoping that it doesn't. We know that they've got the nuclear enriched material in the ceasefire because they're not defending their country, so to speak. And now the military war has become the economic war due to the blockades of the Straits of Hormuz. We know that they could be creating a bomb because they boasted that they had enough material to make 1 bomb in 10 days and 10 to 11 bombs in 3 weeks. Today is day 10. Now, they obviously, due to the fact that we've wiped out 90% of their missiles and drones, they cannot hit the United States with a missile. However, the main U.S. post inside the Middle East is CENTCOM, and I worry about CENTCOM being attacked. They've been able to defend themselves against the conventional weapons. I'm worried about the fact that if they do have a nuclear weapon, I'm worried about the fact that CENTCOM could be their target. Now, today it was advertised that they have agreed to produce no nuclear weapons and that they have agreed to turn over what President Trump calls nuclear dust. That is not really radioactive nuclear dust. It's uranium being enriched, and when the explosions happened on those 3 facilities, and possibly this 4th facility, when that stuff explodes, because it's underground, I've talked about fallout in the past. Everybody should know that with a radiological device going off, all of that stuff is sucked up into the atmosphere. The winds carry it across the oceans, and it's called fallout. Some of that fallout, as I mentioned before, and I'll mention cobalt, nickel, and what we call a 10,000-year half-life. So it's around forever. And that's what's happening in Chernobyl right now. After 42 years, that stuff is still there. Okay, so how do we get rid of the nuclear quote-unquote dust? We have to put radiation protection personnel, plus the military personnel on these ships that are being trained to determine the radioactive level of the energy that's being emanated in the air into these underground areas, or even above ground if there's some above ground. Then we have to bring in radiation protection people and a specific lead, I'll call them lead barriers, to be able to decontaminate all of this and collect it all. The other aspect of this is I'm losing my train of thought here. Give me a minute. The war with Iran, with this blockade, 14 ships to date have been allowed to pass. Now, the rest of those ships are sitting in there, and in the past I mentioned that in 76 to 1980, when I was in Port Arthur, Texas as a junior officer for the Coast Guard, I inspected ships, cargo ships, LNG ships, crude oil carriers, chemical carriers, both foreign and American. When those ships set at anchorage and wait to come into port to either load their cargo or offload their cargo, in that time frame, 76 to 80, that company was losing $30,000 today. As I talk to you today about those ships not being able to move, not being able to support the economic aspects of their flag countries, they are spending between $30,000 a day to $100,000 a day. And there were over 3,000 ships being held up in the Straits of Hormuz. So you can see that Iran, being economically, initially militarily taken out, and now economically being prohibited, they're not the only country that's feeling the hard effects and hardships of the economic war. The United States is too, because of the amount of ships that we have to keep over there. You have to remember that crude oil is broken down into kerosene, aviation fuel, crude oil for use on diesel ships, et cetera, et cetera. So it's extremely important to get these straits open. They've also agreed today, in addition to the nuclear aspects, to open the Straits of Hormuz. It's been publicized by our president and commander-in-chief of the United States, but I haven't seen it come to fruition yet, either documentation online or through the computer. Now, the other thing I'll mention is in the past, I said that there were 2 main newscast programs that I listen to. One is called Fox News. The other one is called Newsmax. There was a retired general called Keene in Fox News, and he, in my opinion, has been the most supportive, objective, and documenting events and what's going on and the statistical aspects of this. He has been right on, and I strongly recommend to you folks listening that you go to Fox News, click along the icons along the bottom, and when you see General Keene, his name is Keane, in a podcast, please listen to what he says, because he is 100% accurate as to what's going on. He's 100% accurate for his opinion, and he's 100% accurate in depicting what the philosophy and what the actions of the federal government are. So I ask you to please do that. Okay, Neil. I'm getting off the soapbox, so to speak.
All right. So,
But
you know, and
the only the only other thing I'll mention, I have a fifth book I'm considering, and I'm sure there are going to be others that are going to get it out before me. We could take this war, Epic Fury, and create a fictional story out of this, and I would call it Freedom's Wrath, which is very similar to Epic Fury as the title for the book. But I have to get this one out. I'm hoping to have Desperate Countermeasures out by the 1st of July. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, that's fine, Len. Definitely enjoying this conversation. I think that you are still with the Straits of Hormuz open and this agreement being made semi with Iran. You don't believe that they're going to follow it.
Well, like I said, I've heard it, but I haven't seen it documented. They also have to realize, Neil, that because we're not keep allowing any cargo to go out and any cargo to come in, they're going to be, now they are already, economic dire straits. I think within the next 2 weeks, they're going to have to put the white flag up because economically, their inflation rate right now in that country is 180%.
Wow. It kind of reminds me of how bad we hit Germany, but that led to a Nazi regime. But remember, Germany's a lot bigger country than Iran, right?
Yes.
With the way
population wise.
Yeah. So being able, what Germany was able to do to take over most of everywhere because of our sanctions. So just always look at those specific things. But because everyone else is against them in the Middle East, they really don't want to see them do well. I mean, it's perfect. You develop, you get rid of them economically, you destroy all the different things, you're going to win. So we'll find out what happens. But I mean, will Iran follow it? That's the key thing. Will they follow the rules?
The other thing I'll mention real quick is in the news, they've arrested a couple of Chinese people bringing E. coli DNA into this country. I mentioned China owning hundred thousands of acres around military facilities. Our main adversary behind Iran is China. And I think Iran is China's puppet. I firmly believe that that's the case.
All right. So we'll find out what happens. And the last thing is that you finish up with this. We can purchase your book by going to jlensciuto.com, or it's in finer bookstores, especially on Amazon. And
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and others as well.
And finish us up.
And I also have a website, jlensciuto.com. It's all lowercase. If you wish to talk to me or send me a message or ask me questions, I'm available to do that for you all. And thank you for listening this morning.
Absolutely. And appreciate it, Len. Thanks again. All right. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.